Hi, my name is Bob Greenyer, and I'm a volunteer with the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. So, welcome this 18th of January 2026. First, they mock you. How is everyone? Hello, Zandra Doro. Hello, Gordon Doherty. Hello, Corky Goss is in the house. Justo Mimo 2822. Hello, X Lumpy, Stephen Phantom. Hello, EBB 2421. Hello, KS Agent. Hello, Everyday Alchemy. Ryan's Wood is in the house. Wonderful. We've got people from all over. Hi, John Weir. Hello, Nathaniel Hanks. Hi, Artifact. Fantastic work you're doing there, Artifact. You'll see. Hi, Stephen B. Halls. Welcome, Mela Fury. Hi, Yoni. Hi, Mika Avila. Yes, we have Europeans. We have Australasians. We have Americans. What a wonderful group. Estonians. Yes, we got some Europeans and Scandinavians. Hi, Ken Pratt. Wonderful to have you here. Hi, Green Hiker. How is everyone? Well, I'm going to do something a little bit different today. And I'm going to be focusing on a person that last year came out of nowhere and kind of was a bit of a shock for those that don't remember. When I was in Japan, I gave my presentation, I was given a bunch of documents and I had to pare those down before I was able to fly because I didn't have enough baggage between me and the others traveling back to Europe. And I went through these documents rather than sleep the night before I flew, and I found some documents. And one of those documents was a summary of a patent and a series of letters post-dated that were sent to one Takaaki Matsumoto, and they were referring to an invention. And we are going to look at that in a little bit more depth today, but not the invention itself, but one of the people behind that invention. So I have a blog called Power from Small Suns, and that is the one we're going to quickly look at to start this off. And it is here on remote view, so you can go and look at this at your pleasure. And we're going to look here. So Power from Small Suns, and this is key part of the patent. Anyway, it was talking about the plasma stays in a small confined space. Heat and electric power can be extracted from the plasma on an as-needed basis to power any device from a small lawnmower or small water heater all the way to a large system that supplies electric power for many cities. The resulting fusion energy swirls into a spherical ball that creates its own self-holding magnetohydrodynamic effect in a stable shape. This is called fusion-powered ball lightning and could very well be the power of the future. And of course, this was written by Warren Cooley, but one of the other people that partnered up with him in this patent was one Chuck Bennett. And you see a number of people referenced here. The first one is Chuck Bennett, and the last one here is Chuck Bennett. So second to last one is Chuck Bennett. The very last one is Hal Fox of Fusion Facts, March 1995. Change of direction by the DOE. Maybe we can look at that. But also there is Frolov, Russian. Extraordinary traces produced by pulse discharges in water. This is Takaaki Matsumoto. And I think these are some Italians. But anyway, the interesting thing for me was Hal Fox was a major proponent of Ken Shoulders. So we basically had Russian, Italian, the patent proposers, and Matsumoto and Ken Shoulders are referenced in this. And it was sent to all these different people, like Bill Clinton and the Director of Correspondence for Vice President Al Gore, all of these senators and congressmen, and all of the heads of the major labs and technical journals and major newspapers. Okay. And the patent brief here is a summary that was deemed not to cause the patent to be to have a problem with being patented. And we're going to see this in some of the work that I'm about to go and look at in a little while. But essentially, they had a magnet with a south down here and a north. This means you had a homogeneous magnetic field to align whatever happens in here. You had a trigger pulse. You had some material that we will see is a donut-shaped fuel sample, which is loaded with deuterium. It's made of compressed carbon-60 buckyballs, and it triggers and it produces this structure, which is said to be, and you'll see, a plasmoid. And it's not the best magnetohydrodynamic structure. It doesn't look at the 3D nature of it, but it specifically says that the fusion process occurs in this little black spot in the center here, and that is where we have determined it to occur. Okay, and so we will look at that in a little bit more detail. And I went on and showed in this various bits, but I made a mistake, and I have mentioned it since that I made a mistake, that I thought this particular reference was in a journal that was published by one Stephen Crivet on his New Energy Times site. And the reason is that I came across this New Energy News, but it was on New Energy Times site. So you can see up here, maybe you can't, if I get rid of my mugshot, you can see this is New Energy Times up here, but actually it is New Energy News that this is in. And I wrote to Stephen, and the reason I wrote to Stephen is that when I was looking to see if there was any other work by either Chuck Bennett or Warren Cooley, because I wanted to see how they came to this understanding and what drove them as people, or anything to do with anything that they had said before, I came across this particular document, which you see here on the New Energy Times site. Okay, and it was the bibliography for New Energy News. So I downloaded this to see if in this New Energy News there was anything, and I typed in the phrase Bennett and Cooley. I didn't find anything under Cooley, but I found all of these articles in various versions of the New Energy News. So this is January 1995, this is September 95, November 1996, and so on. So it was great that I had found what journal that was in. It turns out that that journal was published by Hal Fox, and unfortunately I was told that Hal Fox was not with us, and so Stephen had reached the end of the line there. But I kind of remembered that possibly Jean Manning had got this. So you should go and have a look at Jean Manning's, subscribe to her Substack at Ether, that's by Jeane Manning, and her Substack is Ether. And so I reached out to her and said, look, do you have these particular journal articles? And I think I asked for the April and May articles. This one called Einstein's Mass Dilation and Ether Drag. That sounded good for me. Einstein would have called it cold fusion, although I think that might be, you'll see in a minute, that's wrong. And I wanted to see if she had any of these. And she wrote back to me, funnily enough, and said, I don't. The reason I don't is because I gave you the CDs when I was in Canada, and I go, oh my God, where are they? Where are they? Anyway, what happened was this week I wanted to approach this again and look at Chuck Bennett's work, because obviously he had had a history of publishing in New Energy News and in other places, but principally in New Energy News, this Hal Fox journal. And I started digging around in my cupboard and suitcases, because sometimes I feel like I live out of a suitcase, and I found it. I found the CD. Problem was, I needed a machine that could look at CDs. And, you know, many of you will know now they're not the most easy things to find. Well, I decided I was going to find something, and I've got various old computers I could get working. And it turns out that Gene wrote to me just after I'd found the CD, very weird, and said, you know, I said I'd given you that CD. Well, I actually looked on my shelf today and I saw that I had the whole thing printed out, all of the articles from this sort of 11-year period, of a 10-year period from 1989 all the way through to 1999. So I thought, fantastic, except I've already got the CD. So thank you very much, because she was offering to scan them and send them over, bless her. And I said, no, I've actually found the CD. I just need to, I need to find a computer and get it working. And if I can't do that, then yes, I'll ask you to scan some documents and send them over. The ones that you see here, these Bennett documents here, okay? Well, as it happens, I have an old 2007 laptop. Its screen didn't work, but it does have an external video port. I managed to plug it in. I managed to reinstall the Windows Vista on it. And yes, I got this CD, which is here somewhere, if I can find it. I got all of the files of this CD, this Journal of New Energy News, Fusion Information Center by Hal Fox, and I found the documents in question. And honestly, it kind of teared me up a bit, kind of blew my mind. You're going to learn a little bit about this man's history, the kind of person he was, his angle and how he came into this, how soon he came into this, which is absolutely incredible, absolutely incredible. And you're going to find out that he suggested some things very, very early on. It wasn't just this 1995 collaboration with Warren Cooley. He was right on the money from the beginning, and you can see the progression in his understanding. And you can also learn that he was mocked. We already know that his patent with Warren Cooley was classified in 1995, but that isn't all there is to this story. So, before I go on, I think it's only fair to start where we finished off last week, and it was on this experimental study on deuterium production from titanium hydride powders subject to thermal cycles. And I talked about this, and you can see that they did some deuterium and hydrogen loading of titanium, and they found they suggest that there are these reactions that lead to deuterium and tritium being formed, and so on. This is the apparatus, and they found some diversions from heating power, but they were focused down this end of the table, and I was focused up the other end of the table. And for those that didn't check back on my blog, I showed that here, the red line here is after meltdown, and the blue line is before meltdown. And what shocked me, I wasn't looking at this end of the table, I was looking at this absurd ratio between 3638 and 40 argon, because 40 is by far the most abundant argon isotope. And we already know that titanium exploding in the Leonid Aroitsky experiments produced iron. So I put it into Brian's version of the Parkhomov MFMP reaction tables here. And I find out, like, basically one of the most energetic reactions when you have a coherent energy transformation process, 47 titanium and 47, i.e. both the same isotope, and so they're easy to get into coherence, leads to the most abundant isotope of iron, that is to say iron 56. It's the most energetic by far, so it's fitting it into a small box, and it produces argon 38. And in the case of the next coherent matter process, where you've got 46 and 46, you've got argon 18 and iron 54. Sorry, argon 38. So iron was observed in the Arutskoyev explosion. In fact, they observed the lines of titanium and iron in the spectra observed. Of course, there's argon in the air, so they wouldn't know that the argon was necessarily produced by the process. But in this case, it's quite striking. And why is it quite striking? Because you are getting this non-common isotope for the first reactions, even when you're not fully coherent, 47 and 49 and 46 and the most abundant titanium 48. You're still getting 38, 38, 38, 38. Right, you have to come all the way down here, and this is 46 and 46, so that wouldn't go in preference beyond this 46 and 46. And this 47 and 47 producing 36 wouldn't go in preference over this 47 and 47. So you're most likely to get argon 38, and still down here with 46 and 49, which it's not present in any other combination here. Again, it's argon 38. So really, 38 is the thing that seems to get produced most out of this. And when we look at it, we look at this part of the table here, we see that if you look at the ratio between argon 40 here and the ratio to the rarest isotope of argon, which is 38, that normal argon is 99.6% argon 40 and only 0.063% is argon 38. So if you do the division there, you get 1,581 times more argon 40 over 38. And actually, if you look after meltdown, it's up here above the 10 to the minus 7 line here. And if you go all the way down here, it's way down in the 10 to the minus 10, approaching 10 to the minus 9. This is about the right number of orders of magnitude between the two when it's looking at predominantly the air when the apparatus is broke and it is seeing argon from the natural environment. But here, the ratio in the reactor of argon, which, you know, it's not starting with argon presumably, but in this reactor here, we have this one below the, just above the 10 to the minus 8 line here. And we have this one, which is just over the one blip above the 10 to the minus 9 line. This is less than 1 order of magnitude. Okay? So this is less than 10 times as big. It should be 1,581 times as big. So this is an extraordinarily enriched isotope of 38. And so I advised them to look in their titanium samples for the potential presence of iron. And there we have it. Now, I've talked about these people, and I've said that, you know, they are how should we put this? I said one of these people was quite interesting. And in fact, they're both interesting. So these are the authors of this paper, and it's in, I think, Symmetry Journal or something like that. Symmetry 2024. And it's Luca Gambarale. And Luca Gambarale apparently works at Quantum Matter Incorporated in New York. He's also at LEDA SRL in Italy, in Milano, and in the physics department of the University of Milano, I'm going to say this wrong, Bicocca, in Milan as well. Okay. Giovanni Modenese here is in the Free University of Bolzano in Italy also. Okay. As I said before, Luca Gambarale worked with Giuliano Preparata, who came up with the coherent ground state of water, and he tutored under him and advanced the coherent idea. So he's very much into the process being a coherent matter process. Giovanni Modenese may be interesting to some people, and I would argue he's interesting. And I did this question of Grok. I asked the question, list the top 20 most infamous gravity researchers by name only. And the number one top person is Ning Li, and of course we know she seemed to be doing something similar to Eugene Podkletnov, and then she kind of disappeared, and that probably makes her more infamous or famous, as you might like to put it. But here, down at then number 3 is actually Thomas Townsend Brown. We go down a couple of people who I don't know who they are. Roger Babson and Douglas G. Torr. Don't know who they are. But here, number 6, we have Giovanni Modenese. And he worked with Eugene Podkletnov on theory side for this. Now, if we go down the list, actually, Eugene Podkletnov comes in again. At number 20, because it's a different spelling of him. So we have Viktor Grebennikov all the way down here. We've spoken in the past, long time ago, about Henry Wallace. But there's also Mark Sokol here, which is interesting. He's over there in New York or in New Jersey, I think, maybe. But here we go. We've got Eugene Podkletnov at 2 and number 20. Twice in the list because of different spellings of his name. But Giovanni Modenese, this person that reached out to me because of this paper and considering the coherent matter nature that they are explaining this by, is also connected to gravity. Okay, well, getting back into this, I want to start looking at the work of Chuck Bennett or Charles Bennett, because it is really rather special. And you'll see why. But yeah, very, very interesting. So let me start pulling these guys up. Okay, these papers. So the first one is called Fusion Overkill. And the DOE strikes back. And these were flyers mailed to many major periodicals, US representatives and senators. So this was his modus operandum, which was to send out these documents to these various people to try and keep them updated. So I don't think it was the first time when he sent out that patent abstract. Okay, so what we're looking for here is New Energy News, January 1995, and I've prepared it here for our viewing pleasure, hopefully. Oh no, this is 1994. Okay, what am I looking at here? Oh, this is something else where he's referenced, okay, in Fusion Facts. And I think New Energy News came out of Fusion Facts, I think in 1995. There was a big change at that time with different things. This even got a color headline on it. And you can see here Hal Fox, I think, is the editor. And I think he actually ran this thing. And he's talking about alchemy here, right in the first pages here. But let's see what we have here in this Fusion Facts. I'm going to search for Bennett. Okay, so this looks like it's just a commentary piece here. It's early on. It's just on page 6. Okay, so Charles Bennett, warm fusion in so this is actually in another document, another news sheet or whatever. I don't know. I don't have access to this, so maybe if someone does, it's called Cold Fusion Update, number 4, September 1994. So this is actually December 1994, so it's referring back to something else that he published in September 1994, pages 12 to 18. I think it might even be reprinted in here, but we're going to see. Bennett reviews and comments on the rocky road from Fleischmann and Pons to ICCF3 in this reprint. Oh, so he's reprinting what he published here. So I think we've got everything we need. In this reprint of his speech to a chapter of the California Society of Professional Engineers in January 1994. Okay, all right. So this is a full year before he starts trying to tell people about this patent where he's working with Warren Cooley. In this article, maybe it was because he was talking about this that he ended up working with Warren Cooley, who knows. In this article, Bennett proposes an alternative theory in which he defines a Q particle, okay, a Q particle, all right, as a basic cell of our universe. Okay, this is interesting. This is interesting already. Then the Q is seen as a resonance or a grand conjunction of many particles. Okay, so he's seeing that there's a basic cell of our universe which is made up of a lot of many basic particles. So it's a grand collection of many particles. Okay, Bennett describes an experiment involving the use of deuterated titanium, hello, at liquid nitrogen temperatures and high pressures. When the deuterated titanium is suddenly heated, oh my God. What we are looking at here is something that is very similar to this paper by Luca Gambarelli and Giovanni Modenese. He's saying that they are loading titanium with a hydrogen isotope, very cold, obviously liquid nitrogen temperatures, something like, I think it's -70 or something, and high pressures. And then when the deuterated titanium is suddenly heated, Bennett expects a form of warm fusion to occur. Okay, all right. So essentially what this paper is here by Luca Gambarelli and Giovanni Modenese is a paper that is referring to thermal heat cycling of deuterated or hydrided titanium and seeing synthesis of elements. We already know from other papers that it produces neutrons. Down here, I think they've got a conclusion down here or discussion. This work demonstrates for the first time to our knowledge the production of deuterium through the thermal excitation of titanium powders loaded with hydrogen. Well, I've seen other examples, but anyway, this experiment result was motivated by the theoretical studies predicting generation of neutrons within the metal under appropriate stimulation. The presence of neutrons implies deuterium production, creating a coherent link between the experimental results and theoretical predictions that mutually reinforce each other. The main conclusions are blah, 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 blah. Okay, so you can go and read this in your own time. I've given the links. When the deuterated titanium is suddenly heated, Bennett expects a form of warm fusion to occur. See further information about Bennett on page 10 of this issue. Will do. Bennett has both aerospace and state utility experience and is strongly supportive of further developments in cold fusion. So, I imagine if he's state utility experience, that could be electrical engineering, it could be electricity generation, could it be from a normal thermal plant, could it be from a nuclear plant? I don't know, but what about both aerospace? Where did he work in the aerospace industry? Let's find out, shall we? Okay. And this is where, oh, there we go. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, so this is apparently the reprint. Let's see what we have here. And maybe we should highlight some things. I don't know. Let's see. Charles Bennett, Fusion Overkill and the DOE Strikes Back. Flyers mailed to many periodicals, US representatives and senators. Overview of the flyers. The Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory has announced plans for a $1.8 billion project. So bearing in mind, this is in 1995, to produce fusion energy by activating deuterated micropellets with powerful lasers. The LLNL, deuterated micropellets with powerful lasers. I first disclosed a strikingly similar concept called warm fusion to the Raytheon Company. On March the 24th, 1989, you what? That is the day after Pons and Fleischmann made their initial announcement. Wow. After issuing an Inventors Award to me entitled Nuclear Fusion Candle in April 1989, Raytheon deeded the rights to me. Okay, so I guess what's happened here, he's gone to his employers, it would seem, and he said, I've got an idea. Let's take some deuterated titanium and heat it up, like shock heat it. And I think we're going to get some fusion. And they said, you know what? That isn't something we're going to do here, but you run with it. We're not going to ask for you to give us the rights to it. You run with it. So it would appear that Raytheon, his employer at the time, said, you go ahead, you can have the rights even though you're working for me. I filed a patent with the US Patent Department on May the 10th, 1990, entitled Lukewarm Fusion. The Patent Department did not accept it because they said it was unworkable. Now, the Department of Energy has decided to test their own version at a much greater cost. So his comments here are, I publicly disclosed the concept in a speech to the Peninsula chapter of the California Society of Professional Engineers at the January 27th, 1994 meeting. In the speech, I described a warm fusion furnace with micro pellets of metal deuterated under cryogenic conditions as the fuel. The metal lattice holds the deuterium for ignition without the need for powerful magnetic fields. And what we know is that you can get a higher density of hydrogen into some of these metal hydrides, and it's titanium D2, TiD2, than you can by compressing the gas. You can get a higher density by having it in a metal hydride. The ongoing heat from the furnace allows continued self-sustained fusion, so that enormously high amount of powerful lasers proposed by the LLNL for the initial ignition mechanism is not needed. This is overkill. Boom! So, my friends, what he is suggesting is that you start with your titanium deuteride, TiD2, the sort of stuff that Luca Gambarale and his colleague Giovanni Modenese are using. And you cool that, which is going to squeeze it. And this is not increasing the pressure by compressing a gas. This is increasing the pressure by that metal lattice shrinking. So massively increasing the pressure on that TiD2. And then you drop that pellet and then you hit it with a bunch of things that's going to heat it very, very quickly. And of course, lasers would be the thing. Right now, we have much more powerful lasers available domestically. You can get incredibly powerful lasers for laser cutting machines. You can buy them commercially. So, if we already know by just slightly thermally cycling TiD2 in the Luca Gambarale and Giovanni Modenese, and we also know that we are getting fusion and fission in the exploding titanium foil in water of Leonid Aroitskev. And in those, we get plasmoid tracks, ball lightning tracks. We get ball lightning formed. We get micro ball lightning formed after the ball lightning forms. We get topological monopoles, changing the magnetic moment of iron 57. 0.7 of a meter outside of the reactor. We get strange radiation tracks. In fact, the term strange radiation came from those exploding titanium metal foils. And we get the synthesis of both heavier and lighter elements. And that is just a titanium foil. Not actually, as far as I know it, pre-deuterated or pre-hydrided. And we are just running an electric pulse through it Okay. And we get these effects, all of the effects that are signatures of the process. This proposal, at least the current version of it in January the 27th, 1994, long before the LLNL decided to do their work with it, and it's a diamond pill with I think it's a diamond sphere with the deuterium and tritium in there. Long before, even in January 27, 1994. But if he is implying that he said this on March the 24th, 1989, it stands to reason that what Giovanni Modenese and Luca Gambarelli, combined with what we know from Leonid Aristiev, combined with what we know from the most energetic reactor ever done by Mizuno, 800 COP, was using tungsten in that case. Sorry, that's the wrong one. But we have found, like, if you just compare the Gambarelli and Giovanni Modenese and Luca Gambarelli and the Leonid Aristiev, you combine those and you do the extremist version using, let's say, off-the-shelf lasers. You can have pellets coming out of a chamber of liquid nitrogen, pre-deuterated pellets, where the D2 is already under intense compression, and you smack it with a laser pulse. I believe you will get fusion, and I believe, my friends, that this guy was bang on the money. He was bang on the money. This may be a practical pulsed fusion device. You can time the lasers so that they precisely, or you can even possibly even vision track the particles dropping down. You can pulse the lasers so that they do what is in this case electrostatic confinement of the pellet. And we already know it does fusion and fission. We already know it. It's not a guesswork. We already know it. He goes on. The opening remarks of the speech, warm fusion is a hybrid between cold fusion and hot fusion. The temperatures of operation are much higher than the laboratory room temperatures, yeah, it's laser pulses, of many current experiments of the so-called cold fusion, but nowhere near the extremely hot temperatures and high pressures of the hydrogen bomb. The Department of Energy has responded to my proposal for an experiment to test the concept of warm fusion. A rejection was expected, but not one that was so arrogant, presumptuous, and reactionary. The following is an analysis of sent by the Division of Advanced Energy Projects, Office of Basic Energy Sciences. The proposal includes arguments that rely on a number of unverified physical concepts. The notion that heating a cold fusion device leads to a new type of mass energy conversion has never been shown. The existence of the Q particle and a different medium besides the space-time continuum for physical processes are unproven. I don't know what's going on here, but we're going to find out. The experiment proposed is very large in scale and not justifiable in the absence of previous experimental proof of an effect. Also, references to work involving hydrogen in nickel. Okay, so he obviously proposed also nickel, and this is not surprising because Piantelli had also found the nickel-hydrogen system, are not cited or discussed in detail. In summary, the proposal involves a number of highly speculative assumptions. The failure of any one of those assumptions destroys the overall concept. The principal investigator is trained as a mechanical engineer. Oh, that hurts. That hurts, because that's what I'm trained as. So what if you're trained as a mechanical engineer? What he suggested one day after Pons and Fleischmann made their announcement was pretty much on the money. He's a mechanical engineer, not wrong sort of person to be doing anything physics-like. Wrong sort of person. You haven't got the right qualifications, have you? There is no evidence of training or experience or publications. Oh, sorry, he obviously can't come up with an idea because he's not published. Oh, he can't come up with, he can't propose a new experiment because he hasn't already done it successfully. And he's not been trained in the idea of fusion. He's not been trained, so therefore he cannot know. He cannot even speculate. He cannot even come up with a reasonable idea. He hasn't even got publications in the areas of elementary particle physics. He doesn't know anything about elementary particle physics, or he's not published in it. So if he does not know how to speak, how we all speak, he clearly can't speak for anything. He just needs to be mocked. He just needs to be mocked. He clearly doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't even know about plasma fusion physics. He doesn't even know about relativity and cosmology. The guy is a practical idiot. Why would we ever consider his idea? All these fields are referenced in the proposal. Yeah, but he's suggesting you deuterate titanium. Metal hydrides and titanium deuteride is one, as I've said earlier, of the highest amount of hydrogen you can get in a particular volume of anything. I think it's higher even in palladium, but titanium deuteride is TiD2, okay? Or TiH2. It's a lot of hydrogen in the metal lattice. And then he's suggesting that isn't compressed enough. That is not compressed enough. No, we want to cool it down cryogenically. We want to cool it down so we are incredibly compressing those. So those dissolved protons or those dissolved deuterons moving around in that metal lattice, moving around. If you're cooling that down, they're almost more likely to be coherent. Remember what happened. Remember what happened that allowed the discovery of the nickel hydrogen system. Let me refresh you. Piantelli was doing a biology experiment. He had a nickel rod. He had a little mouse brain cell and he was stimulating it with an electrical signal. It had oxygen in the atmosphere. He was testing what happens to the chemistry after a brain cell dies. To kill said brain cell, he would flood the chamber that had oxygen in it with hydrogen. The cell would start to die. Its chemistry changes over time. They're interested in how the chemistry changes over time. They want to freeze it a certain amount of time after they start the death process. So they pour liquid helium in there, which is like 4.6 Kelvin or 4.3 Kelvin or something. It's around somewhere between 4 and 5 Kelvin. It's like the coldest thing known to man when you're not doing laser or magnetic cooling. And what happened? It boiled the cryogenic 250 watts of cooling. It boiled it and then it broke the apparatus. That was cooling a hydrided metal. The only metal in the cell was nickel. That was a coherent matter nuclear process. A coherent matter nuclear process. Helium, it's all one isotope. Coming in. What was it making? I suspect he would have found some carbon in there. Okay, so he's referring to nickel. He's referring to nickel. So maybe he had the insight when he heard the story about Piantelli. Oh my God, I was right. We cool this thing down and we then massively heat it up and it's compressed. If we hydride the metal first. He was asking for a 1.65 million budget over 2 years. Finally, the budget of 1.65 million over 2 years is beyond the scope of projects supported by the Division of Advanced Energy Projects. Hold on a cotton picking minute. How much was he offering? What were they asking for their LLNL? What were they asking for? I think they were asking for billions, weren't they? 1.8 billion. Yeah. Okay, so the Department of Energy decides they're going to spend 1.8 billion, but they don't want to spend 1.65 million. Happy to spend we can employ a lot of people and get some backhanders and, you know, get some votes with this. We can't get any votes if we give 1.65 million to someone, can we? Okay. The philosophy contained in the above statement suggests that new thinking is not allowed. New thinking is not allowed. I would agree, because you are not experienced as anything other than a lowly, not worthy of any reverence mechanical engineer. You have no training, you have no experience, you have no publications, you don't know anything about elementary particle physics, you don't know anything about plasma fusion physics, you don't know anything about relativity, and nothing about cosmology, even though you quoted them in your proposal. Right? So you were just misguided. And because you don't know anything about these things, and because you're suggesting something that quite possibly should be there, then probably you're not worth our money. Not even this much. The analysis also demands that required credentials be in disciplines that have denounced new innovations such as cold and warm fusion. Okay, so basically he's spot on the money here. He's saying that, like, they're saying you must agree to the dogma of mainstream thought. And once you agree and are proven yourself as a good little programmed citizen, you may be allowed to think of new thinking. Only when you've proven yourself to think like everyone else. It's so absurd. It's so absurd. They are mocking him. Furthermore, the DOE refuses to fund cold-warm fusion so they can perpetuate claims of no proof. This is catch-22. Bearing in mind, this is 1994, December 1994. Here we are, 31 years later, and we're still having to go through this nonsense. This is an example of one of the many reasons that the American public is so mad at the government. First, the bureaucracies thrash a new idea with an unsubstantiated chain reaction of frivolous attacks. Then they revamp the idea to make an overblown, expensive version of their own. There we go. He should have asked for $1 billion, then he might have got it. He should have said, I'd like to do this at a national lab and I want $1 billion. Instead, he said, I only want it for 2 years and 1.65 million. Not enough. Actually, the editor, Hal Fox, here makes a reasonable comment. And he's trying to comment on how one should approach these funding requests. Charles E. Bennett is to be commended for his next day idea disclosure to his employee, Raytheon, on March the 24th, 1989. Yes, Chuck, you should. His 7 one-page articles that he has written about cold and warm fusion indicate that he is a champion for new enhanced energy systems. We do not have access to his proposal to the Department of Energy. However, it must be remembered that the worst pitfall for a bureaucrat is to make an error in judgment that can be attributed to that bureaucrat. Yeah, so they're playing it safe. Bureaucrats do not hold offices to solve problems. I love that. Bureaucrats do not hold offices to solve problems. If an office is set up to solve a problem, a solution might mean the end to such an office. Boom! That is the difference between government and the commercial world. Unfortunately, for those government workers out there, that's how people outside of government think about it. I had some people I met recently, and they said they're going into politics, and I said, that's a fantastic idea. I said, I couldn't do it myself. I couldn't deal with the moral dilemma, right? But in politics, you get the opportunity to vote your salary higher. You don't actually have to do anything. You just have to pretend you're going to do something to get voted in. And when you're in, just make sure you feather your own nest. It's what you do, right? But if you have a problem to solve, make sure you do not solve it. Make sure you talk about solving it, you get the money flowing to solve it, and you have the opportunity to divert that money to things that you want to divert it to, or people you want to divert it to. But don't solve the problem, because if you're in, and that is the one thing you've got to solve, and you solve it, then you're out of a job. That's what an engineer would say. If an office is set up to solve a problem, a solution might mean an end to such an office. Very good. Very good. Hal Fox. Therefore, we are not surprised by the comments that Bennett received. He would probably get similar comments from the peer reviewer. Interestingly, the person writing for the DOE shows an abysmal lack of contact with the literature when he states the notion that heating a cold fusion device leads to a new type of mass energy conversion has never been shown. You know, they're not interested in whether there's literature out there. Fleischmann and Pons have carefully demonstrated the need for an increase in energy to trigger the energetic cold fusion. However, Bennett needs to be coached on how to write a proposal to a government agency. Yes, this is a skill. This is a skill. You do not allude to Q particles or to some different medium for the physical process. One must only ever so gently propose to extend the current knowledge. Bowl. See something, say something. See what you see, say what you see, and let the chips fall where they may. Propose to extend the current knowledge. Yeah, no, not really. If you want government or academic support, new science, however accurate, is not popular in either government or university laboratories. Yep, I can attest to that. But I'd like this guy as my wingman, or I would have liked to have been his wingman. He's a man after my own heart, Chuck Bennett. And I think Hal Fox was a good man too. I know Hal Fox is not around. I would love to know if Chuck Bennett is around, but I don't think he is. I've been surprised before, pleasantly, but I don't think he is. And it's a great shame. It's a great shame. But if he was around and he had been around today, or he is around, stick at it, stick at it, stick at it, stick at it, and the truth always comes out. Bennett's second mistake was to propose himself as the principal investigator. There you go, there you go. In the government and academia world, where PhD proliferate, one must have a highly regarded PhD to be the principal investigator. Lesser qualifications are not sufficient, unless you have strong political clout with the agency to which the request is submitted. On that end, I am proposing to do a paper with Binjuan Huang for major publication on the data acquired, physical data, incontrovertible, repeatable physical data of signatures of the process going on inside his reactor. I haven't got a chance of being published because I don't have the right labels after my name, but he is a professor of thermodynamics for 50 years, hence why I did my presentation last week. It's a workup on some of the concepts that may be in that paper. This week, following a meeting last year with Henk and Jan Rack, who is also a professor who worked at CERN and worked at Sandia Labs and worked with Eugene Podkletnov for a period of time, and he also worked in Finland. We are also looking to write a paper on the topological monopole producing the coherent ground state. He's done some fantastic treatment, taking forward the paper by Wisniewski. He understands it, and I have very, very good news to report that the SEM EDS that you, via your donations, have been effectively investing in through the MFMP's use of that to show all these things over the last several years, based on a presentation that predominantly included the work of myself and the reactor of Henk Uren, and a meeting that was held in the Alchemy of Prague, and since, people seeing what we were doing and what it could reveal, it would seem that with the wonderful presentation that he has made, that the money has been raised to secure that SEM EDS. And so moving forward, we should be able to provide more and better imagery of experiments. And so I'm looking to write a paper with him, again, more on the physics side, and he really knows his quantum mechanics and how to frame it for the mainstream. So the work that I hope to achieve with Binchen Huang will be focused on the thermodynamics and the physical processes. So 100% the energy has been produced. It had to have been produced some way. There was no carbon in the reactor to start with. There's a long history of carbon being synthesized. The predominant fuel is hydrogen, protium, and oxygen-16. If you consider the protium, you get enough to boil a lot of water to make a lot of tea. That's one. The second one will be to focus on the method of coherence. And I'm hopefully these two partnering up with experienced and respected PhD and professors in their respective fields of thermodynamics and quantum mechanics will be able to get more people snowballing into understanding that this is a real field. So I hadn't read this advice by Hal Fox to Chuck Bennett, but I've realized that it is the only way forward, having did that work in late 2023 into 2024 with Binchen Huang and his incredible team in Taipei. It is only the way forward that we can get the message out in a serious fashion. For a positive contribution to Charles Bennett, he is strongly advised to take his case to the business and financial world, and this is the point. The government, especially the Department of Energy, is not going to fund a project that, if successful, makes it evident that they have been misspending billions of dollars in the pursuit of various types of hot fusion. That there is the big rub. He's all in capitals. We suggest that you define a small but carefully defined experiment that can be completed with a few $1,000s. Many of the government laboratories will now cooperate with industry for well-defined experiments that use existing government lab equipment. Yeah, if you're going to pay for our equipment, and we might get to look to see what you're going to do, then we're up for that. Fusion Facts would be willing to publish such a proposal and maybe even suggest some willing PhD partners. And that is the way forward. Bennett is certainly correct about the official action that denies funds and then continues to claim no proof. However, Japan, with its limited energy resources and a culture that recognizes sources of energy within and about us, is not so dogmatic. So what if Japan becomes the manufacturer and distributor of new cold fusion energy sources? Who are they going to demote at the Department of Energy? Don't give up, Charles. A few skirmishes may be lost, but the battle will be won. Yes, yes. Full on Hal Fox. That was a really good response to his long-standing. So you have to understand that this is a fight that Chuck Bennett, Charles E. Bennett, had since first making that suggestion on March 24th, 1989. And here he is in January 27th, 1994, talking about his ideas in more detail, and then he finds out that the US Department of Energy made a much more ridiculous and expensive system to work with. Okay, but to clarify where we are right now, I believe that Chuck Bennett's idea is workable, and we have data from Luca Gambarelli and Giovanni Modernese and the work of Leonid Iroitskev that 100% point in the direction that it will work, and it'll probably work better than either of those two experiments. Okay, with that said, we're going to have a look at some of the other things that he wrote. Right, so that was just the first on the list, Fusion Overkill, January 1995. The next one is Fullerene Fusion Electrodynamic Generator. Well, for those that haven't seen it, I will go into that. So this is January 1995. Is that the one? I don't know whether that is. Let me see what we've got here. Bennett. I'm going to do it. Okay. Okay, so this is actually in a different journal. This is New Energy News. And I think this is a copy of the same thing. So he did send it out to someone else. Lukewarm fusion. Yeah, this is the same thing. And he's basically, this is a reprint. Okay. Okay, so he actually sent this out in October and November 1994. Okay. Okay. And he's got this comical image here about peer review. And that is there any comment on this? Okay. No. So there's no comment in here. So I think the comment by Hal Fox was really good. Okay, so the next one is a quantized ether from November 1996. Okay, so this is September. Oh, this is another document. Okay, so I did quite a lot looking for his work. So we'll see. This is interesting because actually September 1995 here. This is Dr. Harold Aspden, and he's talking about Bose-Einstein condensates. And the reason is because this was when the first verified Bose-Einstein condensate was made with rubidium-87 atoms. And it was done on June the 5th, 1995, and it was published, I think, where was it? In Science on July the 14th, 1995. So in 1995 was a huge year. Remember that this is the time when fusion technology started banning concepts of ball lightning, and also the work of Dr. Takaaki Matsumoto. Okay, so they're talking about cooling and so on, and rubidium atoms, and he's talking about how Einstein, anyway. Let me see what is in here with regard to Bennett, Chuck Bennett. Okay. Bennett. Oh, okay. So this is the document referring to his patent. So we'll just read through this for those that haven't seen it before, so that we've got it all in this record of his work. It's called Bucky Fusion. Charles Bennett, the fullerene fusion group, fullerene fusion electrodynamic generator, patent application, courtesy of the author. Author's abstract. This invention relates to the production of electricity and heat energy by means of an electrodynamic fusion plasma utilizing the material Buckminster fullerene. And I mentioned that actually, very interestingly, when I started doing low-energy nuclear reactions research, I had the grandson of Buckminster Fuller come over to where I am living, spend some time here, and take me out to dinner. And that was very weird. I didn't know why, and I wonder whether I was being monitored. So if you're out there and you're listening to this now, what was the game up? Was it just to say hello, or was it maybe to see where I was? Because bearing in mind, this patent was classified. Co-inventor Warren L. Cooley worked from a theoretical basis established by late Buckminster Fuller and experimented with the concept that energy can be harvested to do useful work from shape, and that certain shapes are inherently energetic. The invention herein described demonstrates that shrinking these characteristics and principles to the scale inherent in naturally occurring structures, i.e. carbon fullerenes, results in catalyst and means of confinement for a fusion reaction. Accordingly, several objects and advantages flow from the invention herein described. the elements of the invention are combined in a manner that could be described as emulating, to some extent, the natural stellar fusion processes that exist in the universe. So like a miniature sun. Each of the Buckminster fullerenes are a miniature sun. You have the actual carbon-60 ball. Inside it has deuterium, and they can be compressed, but also they can carry massive electrical charge on the outside. Okay, so you have your hydrogen nuclei fuel in the center, you have a thing that's holding it together, and electrical charge on the outside. A primary element of the invention is, in fact, a naturally occurring phenomena of the universe, i.e. carbon-60. Another advantage of the invention is that the raw material necessary for production of energy in the invention are abundant and cheap. They also are converted to energy by means that produces no environmentally harmful side effects and byproducts. Figure 1, down here, figure 1, is a cross-sectional diagram of the essential elements comprising the apparatus of the invention, a fullerene fusion electrodynamic generator. Figure 2 is a cross-sectional diagram of a fullerene fusion fuel capsule viewed perpendicular to the magnetic axis running through the concentric center of the fuel cell when positioned for ignition. And of course, we know that by having a homogeneous magnetic field, that aligns the protons or deuterons in there so that their spin nuclear moment is aligned. And as I've argued recently, this improves the gravitational focusing of anything that goes on in a plasma toroid and or fractal magnetohydrodynamic structure. Okay. Also, there were magnetic fields over Tuchanov's ball lightning reactor. Figure 3 is a cross-sectional view of a plasmoid, a plasma toroid, showing the axis of the magnetic field and the axis of the electric fields, with streamlines showing the plasma vortex flow patterns. So you have a vortex and an anti-vortex, the flux loop, a tornado, vortex coming into the center. Okay. A fullerene fusion electrodynamic generator designed to produce a direct conversion of fusion energy to electricity and excess heat energy of sufficient temperature to be useful for the production of steam. The carbon sublimes and converts fusion energy release into a mitigated self-holding toroid of supercharged plasma. This fusion-powered combined cycle cogeneration unit can be scaled to any level from very small to a central power plant producing multiple megawatts of power. The generator will burn a fuel cell, 22, comprising a seed catalyst of n numbers of deuterium molecules inside a carbon-60 buckyball. Endohedrally, that means it's inside deuterated fullerene molecules. This is actually, I looked into this, it's actually quite expensive to do. I have a process for doing this, it's actually quite expensive to do, but we know from the work of Klimov that you don't actually need to do this. You just need the carbon nanoparticles, and he's known that for a quarter of a century. Formed in a donut shape. So they're actually starting it off in the shape you want to make it. Around an air bubble, and suspended by conductive filament, and encapsulated by a shell, in a surrounding solution of lithium deuteride and deuterium oxide. Okay, lithium deuteride and deuterium oxide. So we've got lithium in there, lovely. The fuel cell 22 is loaded into a plasma burn chamber that is configured with the axis of the magnetic field, and it's ignited by a phased resonance of electromagnetic waves and acoustic waves. Wonderful. So we have standing electromagnetic waves and standing acoustic waves. Perfect. I like it. I like all of it. To produce a toroid plasma that spins around the axis of the generator's magnetic field. The seed catalyst of deuterated fullerene molecules allows the fusion plasma to take an electrodynamic shape that holds itself together around a spinning vortex. This vortex action not only provides as a means for pulling fuel into a fusion region, but also eliminates the requirement for large power-consuming magnetic fields of containment. It's a self-contained plasma, as typical of current hot fusion experimental protocol. Boom. And here's the kicker, which I've showed before. At press time, we received information that the patent application had been bucked up to the Department of Energy and Department of Defense for classification review. First, they mocked him. They laughed at him. They attacked what he could do. And then they prevented him from having a patent. That, my friends, is why you have to be open. You just have to be open. Because if you get success, if you're really getting to the ball lightning, self-confining, magneto-hydrodynamic structure that will work, if you're anywhere close to that, you won't be able to do it. No siree. So you've got to be open. Sick, but true. So, there we go. Right, so what's the next one on our list? Hopefully we've got a quantized ether here from November 1996. So that one is it that one? No, it's this one. 611. Okay. Nobel Prize nominations for energy by Hal Fox editor. Now that we understand the importance of nature of cold fusion, is it time to nominate Stanley Pons and Martin Fleischmann, Fellow of the Royal Society, and Kenneth R. Shoulders for a Nobel Prize? I think so. I think that these people should have probably got it. Definitely Kenneth R. Shoulders. Kenneth R. Shoulders deserves a part of the prize for his excellent work in discovering and revealing how nuclear reactions take place in both palladium-heavy water system and in sonofusion systems. A further degree of experimental information about nuclear reactions has been added by the Neil Gleason process. Okay. A summary of these fundamental discoveries illustrates how important they have been and will be in the rapid advancement of the treatment of radioactive wastes. Yep, I can confirm that, especially radioactive slurries. The production of thermal energy without neutrons and probably the development of factory-made scarce elements. Yep, I can buy that as well. I can buy that as well. The importance of these discoveries merits a tutorial on the power of ion-carrying charge clusters. Okay, so talks about charge clusters, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that isn't what we came for, sadly. So we're going to go and have a look at Bennett here, because I want to know this man's thinking. All right. A quantized ether. The recent debate about cold fusion has focused on the resurrection of the luminiferous medium, ether. Are you listening out there, Miss Ether Orr? Miss Jean Manning? As a mechanism to explain overunity, production of excess energy in hydrogenated metal lattices and other new energy phenomena. The debate about the existence of such a medium goes back to just before the turn of the century, when Michelson and Morley found none. In 1905, Albert Einstein cast the medium aside as superfluous in a paper entitled On the Electrodynamics of Moving Bodies. A mathematical medium was introduced. A mathematical medium, it's so laughable, was introduced in later years based on a four-tensor Riemannian, I've never been able to say this word, Romanian, I'm going to call it, if I say Romanian though, people get upset, Romanian geometry. The result is quite complicated and is proclaimed to be understood by only a few individuals. A more practical approach to the resurrection of the medium is proposed herein, based on a quantization of the medium. Hold on a minute. This looks something like similar. A spectrum of fundamental particles, coined Q particles, short for quanta. Ah, okay. So these are the Q particles that they dismissed in 1990 when he put his patent proposal forward, that he was allowed to discuss and take away from a defense contractor. short for quanta, creates the medium for larger particles such as the electron and proton. Wow. He's saying there are substructures of the electron and proton. The flow of Q particles results in a toroidal vortex pattern that comprises larger particles. So he's saying basically all particles are toroidal vortex. Kind of liking this guy. I can't deny. I can't say I don't. The mass of an individual particle is determined by the relationship mq(c squared equals kt, where mq is the mass of the Q particle, c is the speed of light, k is a Boltzmann's constant, and t is the temperature in absolute degrees. This relation yields a spectrum of fundamental particles starting on the order of 1,000,000 times lighter than the electron. The wavelength, whatever that is, of a Q particle is determined by the expression mqc, that equals h, where h is the Planck's constant. The simultaneous requirement of the two conditions, blah, blah, and blah, blah, causes the mass to get larger as the temperature gets higher, and the size, as represented by the wavelength, to get smaller as the temperature gets higher. Hot spots are more dense than cooler spots. Hot spots radiate more as the size gets smaller. Therefore, a natural contraction is associated with the smaller, denser regions of matter. As these regions radiate with more energy, the contraction of matter must occur as an automatic consequence. Yeah, so as you radiate more energy, contraction of matter must occur. This is kind of what I was saying last week. It's kind of like all forms of condensation requires a radiation of matter. As an automatic consequence, gravitation is the result of these simultaneous conditions. Quantization of the medium answers many theoretical problems encountered since Michelson and Morley. The dichotomy between ether drag and stellar aberration is nicely explained by a quantized medium. It is surprising that the quanta approach has not been applied to the luminiferous ether, given the success of quantum mechanics. Einstein did not win the Nobel Prize for introduction of special relativity, but rather for the photoelectric effect in 1921. The photoelectric effect is purely a quantum mechanics principle. And then he's asking, any comments and suggestions? Now, he's talking about quantized structures here. Of course, Ken Shoulders believed exotic vacuum objects are fractal, or rather multiple toroidal structures. He didn't call them fractal. He didn't describe how they were structured together. But this reminds me, I have to say, of the work of Shishkin, Kurolz, and Dubovik. And the first one I'll refer you to is Where is the Atom Battery, which I published on October the 9th, 2022. And he says, I have been thinking about this article for a long time. This is Shishkin. It was prompted by the works of Kulak and Petrov, published on the website of the Academy of Trinitarianism. The main idea is that the process of extracting energy from the ether goes on in all electromagnetic oscillatory systems. But the ether, as a source of energy and prima materia, is disregarded by modern classical physics. For example, the Bohr model of the atom, Bohr model, is a semi-classical model of the atom proposed by Niels Bohr in 1913. He based it on the planetary model of the atom put forward by Rutherford. However, from the point of view of classical electrodynamics, an electron in Rutherford's model moving around the nucleus would have to radiate energy continuously and very quickly, and having lost it, fall onto the nucleus. This was my second question in life. To overcome this problem, Bohr introduced the assumption that electrons in the atom can move only along certain stationary orbits in which they do not emit energy, and emission or absorption occurs only at the moment of transition from one orbit to another. Theorists have successfully proved the absence of radiation purely mathematically. However, the atom also rotates, so one more assumption must be made. There is some kind of eternal battery inside the nucleus of an atom. But even the modern researchers who accept the existence of the ether still, for some reason, adhere to the generally accepted model of the atom in their research. Indicative of this sense, and he's dismissing Zatelepin's model here, according to the authors, dark hydrogen, he's talking about how it's justified. However, the mathematical proofs of theorists are opportunistic, since theorists, as a rule, adapt to the regime that exists in science. The assumptions of the authors and the experimental evidence that they provide do not convince me for the following reasons. Okay, so he's explaining why these things don't work and so on. Soft X-rays with energies of up to 10 kiloelectron-volts are constantly recorded under any rapidly occurring mechanical and electromagnetic effects on matter and are associated with the formation and destruction of energy clusters. This is described in detail in this reference. Energy clusters are quasi-stable formations. They are constantly present around us, but fundamental science as a rule does not notice these formations. Energy clusters have many names. Tesla called them radiant energy, Wilhelm Reich called them orgone energy, George Messias called them ectons, Ken Shoulders called them charge clusters, Yuji Bajatov called them erzions, I.M. Shekparanov called them Kozyrev-Dirac monopoles, Leonid Uritskev called them Loschak monopoles. In everyday life, this phenomena is called static electricity. Okay. Here, he expands upon this, and the expansion comes because of the data that I shared from the core of Bin-Juan Huang's reactor. Okay? In part. Okay? January the 14th, 2025, or rather presentations that it's because of the reactor data that I shared. So he in this paper refers to another Russian scientist who builds his understanding that he already had off the data that I shared from Bin-Juan Huang's reactor. And so that data that came from Bin-Juan Huang reactor completely changed how a good proportion of the Russian researchers view how matter is formed and how it interchanges energy with the ether. So this is again Shishkin working in Dubna, the nuclear city north of Moscow. During the 1960s and 1970s, it was already known that workers in certain industries, like welding, suffered from health conditions similar to those experienced by people working with radiation. But how can we explain the usefulness of 235 uranium tablets that were widely used in medicine in the 20s and 30s of the last century? In 2010, a new type of penetrating radiation was experimentally registered using photoemulsion detectors. The smallest units, or quanta. Oh, are we getting a little bit like our friend over here with his quantized matter? Of this unidentified radiation form a dynamic, closed toroidal donut-shaped vortex structure. I think we are. We've got toroidal vortex pattern down here and a quantized ether. Toroidal vortex pattern, quantized ether. Well done, Chuck Bennett. This structure is composed of elements from the primordial matter known as ether. Oh my God. Michelson Morley, ether, luminiferous ether. Well done, Chuck Bennett. Therefore, the quanta can be rightfully called ether solitons, not quantized Q particles, but ether solitons. Okay, ether solitons arise from any critical impact on matter. For example, mechanical shocks, high voltage discharges, ionizing radiation, and high pressure. These quanta leave various traces on surface photoemulsions detectors. In experimental work, 3 components of the spectrum of ether solitons were registered: low energy solitons, LES, medium energy solitons, MES, and high energy solitons, HES. It was found that high energy solitons have no charge, and some of them have magnetic properties. In the present work, the author has attempted to create a theoretical structure for understanding how ether solitons are formed and what their radiation effects are on matter, including humans. Mechanisms of soliton generation. After the 28th Russian Conference on Cold Transmutation of Nuclear and Chemical Elements and Ball Lightning 2024, the author has revised the model of the atom and the magnetotoroelectrical radiation as described in work. So basically, he revised this based on someone else's work, and they revised their understanding based on the analysis that I did, which I called flux capacitor. You can go and look at it on YouTube, based on the core products in Bin-Juan Huang reactors. In the work 6, the etherodynamic model of the proton is described as a toroidal ring ether formation Well done, Chuck Bennett. Well done. With a clearly expressed spin jet, red arrow, characterized by the pumping of an etheric flow through its central zone. This is also like some of the ideas of Hal Puthoff with the ground state of the hydrogen atom. The first attached vortex, the size of which exceeds the size of the proton by 5 orders of magnitude. The spin jet is the true, real spin of elementary particles. Wow. So if we're aligning the real spin, if we are aligning the real spin of the nuclei, what are we doing? If the medium is the thing through which we observe the action of gravity, if you are lining a flux of that, you are moving the ether. You are doing anti-gravity. Specifically, you are doing propulsion. 100%. If you create something a little bit like the Chuck Bennett 1995 proposal, I say to you that it will produce a gravitational vector, and out of the top will be a high-frequency gravity wave. We observe this in David Boutilier's experiments. In the 2004 proposal for a fluidized electromagnetic generator by Ken Shoulders, he said that ounces of apparatus built in this way will not only produce all the energy you need, it will also be able to lift tons. Yes, ounces will be able to lift tons into orbit. Why? Because it is aligning the spin jet, the real spin of elementary particles and atoms as etheric vortex formations, starting with the proton, the properties of which will determine all properties in NMR processes and chemical reactions. Everything is determined by the spin architecture of the molecules. When an electron is attached, a hydrogen atom is born with an outer shell of the atom from the elements of the ether flow, the second attached vortex. In the case of critical impact on the atom shell, due to its elastic forces, the nucleus detaches from the shell along the vector inverse to the spin jet. In this case, the shell, in the form of a soliton and/or spin jet, flies away in the opposite direction from the nucleus. The spin jet flies away apparently in the form of a rotating string with the energy of tens of mega electron volts. In my judgment, it is the RST that leaves a microcrater on the surface and it hits. The diameter of the microcrater, d, with an experimental accuracy of 5%, is directly proportional to the atomic weight A of the nucleus from which the RST flew out. Furthermore, the volume of microcraters for the range of atomic weights from carbon to lead is also fixed constant with a measurement accuracy of 10%. This spin jet is registered by the detector described in 3 and in the field of high energy solitons. So this is a diagram from the work of in reference 6, ether dynamic model of a proton, vortex, anti-vortex, current flow between the two. This is the ether coming in and the spin jet coming out. Okay. The soliton shell turns into either a medium energy soliton or a high energy soliton, but in the case of a supercritical impact, for example by a sharp electromagnetic pulse, the soliton shell, and this is why I argue and have always argued that the critical thing that's going on in Malcolm Bendel's vortex device is the added water flashing to steam, that critical impact in my view, as it goes into the double vortex. And that is why I suggested to Malcolm to bring those two spheres closer together, to maximize the rate at which it does the Armstrong electrostatic boiler effect that was discovered, I believe, in the 1820s in the UK, up there in Newcastle. And you can go and see these in various museums, but basically it is that flashing, that incredible intense event that produces some of these high energy solitons, and you're going to see what that produces. And this will lead into me publishing, hopefully next week, my Tesla tech presentation that I did last year. Okay. In this case, it gives birth to about 10 to the 11 high energy solitons. So the soliton shell turns into either an MES or HES built in the case of a supercritical impact, for example, by a sharp electromagnetic pulse. The soliton shell can also disintegrate. In this case, it gives birth to about 10 to the power 11 high energy electrons with energies up to 10 keV. So 10 keV is what was shown. 10 keV was shown to do nuclear reactions in the work that came out of the European-funded Horizon 2020 project in Szczecin in Poland, of which my former MFMP director colleague, Matthew Vilat, was a key author in that work. Okay? They found that 10 keV, so like these electrons have this 10 keV energy, and each atom can produce a shell, and the shell can then be broken up and produce 10 to the power 11 high energy electrons with up to 10 keV. This is a lot of energy that you can release, which is the hidden energy within matter, which in turn generates soft X-ray radiation and a stream of new solitons. So the actual exploding EVO can trigger more exploding EVOs and actual production of them. And it's not making them from electrons, it's making them from the shell that maintains the normal electron orbit in a proton. You get my drift? Traces of microcraters on X-ray film are shown in figure 1. Photo 2 shows cross-section of microcrater. So these are the impacts of nuclei that were in the energy soliton, and this is the crater, and so they are able to determine the depth and the width with a small factor for all elements up to lead with a small factor based on the nuclei's mass. In the work 5, rough estimation of the effect from RST on the human body was made by way of calculating the energy required to heat water located in the volume in the microcrater to a temperature of 1000 degrees C. This energy, blah, 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 and they said that this could be quite damaging. Okay. But we know because they've got a magnetic component, you can help shield these with like a ferromagnetic material. As we know, they were captured by an iron plate, iron 57 specifically, in the work of Leonid Orytskev. The author believes that the main factor of radiation damage to biological organisms is the high energy string spin jets described above. The work 4 presents the damage caused, in my opinion, by RST to electronic equipment, which was located in the beam path of the small-sized ion accelerator behind the shield of lead, which exceeds the calculated value by many times. Let us consider. So he goes on the fact that gamma radiation can produce these things. That is why I say, and decay of radioactive isotopes, that's why I say that the use of granite in the Great Pyramid would have produced these structures. He says fast neutrons and charged particles will produce them, discharge arresters, emitters of electromagnetic fields, and he shows that the natural in the environment, effectively static electricity, are this spectrum. This is using a detector that they made, and when you do these disruptive discharges, you get these high energy solitons. Ultimately, high energy solitons will decay to medium and low energy solitons. Okay. When registering high energy solitons from discharge arresters and EMI emitters, the detector described in 3 can be calibrated in the first approximation using a gamma radiation source at consecutive irradiation doses, so on. So, this is where it's talking about the properties of low and medium energy solitons. Low energy solitons, LES, have the following properties experimentally detected. They fill all space around us, including living and non-living objects. They resemble gel in their fluidity. This is the medium over which photons travel, and you can aggregate these things, and that explains why you can prevent radiation when you take these out of place. Certain frequencies of light cannot travel. Low energy solitons have magnetic properties. Some of the low energy solitons have a positive charge. He assumes that low-energy solitons participate in the cold transformation of atoms of chemical elements, including in living organisms. Of course, because they're EVOs, they are these energy clusters, they are all of these things that have been observed by all these authors. It has been experimentally discovered that low-energy solitons can quench luminescent centers, including in biological objects, for example, in luminescent crustaceans. This is why it messes up your scintillators. It is possible that low-energy solitons have the property of quenching scintillation centers. We've observed that. Low-energy solitons have favorable effect on all living things. Low energy, not high or medium, but low, have favorable effect on all living things, greatly enhancing the regenerative abilities of living cells and organisms. Okay, so if they're not blowing up in your body, maybe they are in water, or you're receiving ones that are not blowing up, and they go into you, they can greatly enhance. Why? Because they are pulling the ether, the chi, the life force through you, and they can be absorbed into you. Okay? In rooms where experiments with discharges and radioactive sources are regularly carried out, the concentration of low-energy solitons increases significantly. When low-energy solitons are unpacked by a strong electromagnetic pulse or mechanical impact, significant energy is released in the form of a powerful flux of up to 10 to the power 11 of fast up to 10 keV electrons and 5 orders of magnitude fewer ions. It is assumed that inside blood vessels and capillaries, the dynamic changes of soliton size are subject to the rhythms of the heart. Low-energy solitons are absorbed well by water. In my view, this together explains the observations of easy water. Explosions in industries associated with grinding of matter such as flour and sugar, explosions in mines are easily explained by a large concentration of low-energy solitons. Low-energy solitons can be carried by light rays, in particularly by laser. And I've talked about the experiment where I analysed the product of that experiment and found synthesized elements in carbon dioxide forming aluminium. Low-energy solitons can transfer, with the help of light and/or electromagnetic radiation, the properties of matter and biological objects through which they pass. The described properties of low-energy solitons explain useful therapeutic properties of uranium tablets, radon baths, mineral springs, and so on. This is due to the fact that alpha sources generate near themselves low-energy solitons, and mineral waters deep in the earth, due to the high mechanical stresses, are also saturated with low-energy solitons. Medium energy solitons have the LES peak leading edge and high energy solitons trailing edge properties of the black graph up above. Okay. So all of the facts presented make a strong case for conducting in-depth scientific research to answer the far from complete questions. What is the specific energy required for forming them? How does the energy depend on energy of neutrons, and so on? Okay, so what we're missing with the atom battery here, which I can't show you, which is annoying, but essentially, maybe I'll have it in another Shishkin document. Give me a sec. The clustered nature of these, and let me see if I can find that there. Okay, yep, I've got it here. And then you'll see the connection, more connections to what we've just discussed. Okay. So this is earlier work before he clarified based on the work that clarified based on our work. Okay. Suggested model for the cold transformation of elements. I'll come down to the key point down here, is that what he was calling back here, and this was back in 2022, he was calling these magnetotoroelectrical clusters, and he's saying that a magnetotoroelectrical cluster contains 6.93 times 10 to the power 20 elementary LC dipoles. These are background cold neutrinos, background cold neutrino quanta. So, magnetotoroelectrical cluster, this is an energy soliton, this is a form of static electricity, contains 6.93 times 10 to the power 20 background, or basically neutrinos. cold neutrinos. An MTEC consists of 7.71 times 10 to the 10 electronic vortices. Okay, so 7.71 times 10 to the 10 is approximately 1 times 10 to the 11. That are electronic vortices, which are proto-electrons. They're not real electrons, they are proto-electrons. That is to say, when you blow up a magnetotoroelectrical cluster, which is part of an ordinary atom, you can then force the emission of these electronic vortices to become real electrons. Each electronic vortice contains 0.89 times 10 to the power 10 elementary LC dipoles. And if you times this by this, you end up with the amount of background cold neutrinos. So they say that the background cold, Shishkin's, Karols, and Dubovik is the discoverer of the toroidal moment. And the special case of the toroidal moment is the anapole moment, and that is what an LC dipole has, the basic background neutrino. They are saying that is the ether. The gel-like medium is the gel that they considered in the 1800s. There needed to be a gel-like medium that light travels over. They are clusters of LC dipoles, different quantizations of them. And an MTEC is a quantization where you have each EV containing 0.89 times 10 to the power 10, and to make one MTEC, at least 7.71 times 10 to the power 10 electronic vortices, which are proto-electrons. The mass is this, so we know it has a mass. We know these things have a mass. Therefore, this will be relevant when you start to see the rest of what Chuck Bennett said. Dynamic size of an MTEC, length of the shell is this, the torus ellipse is this, the central part is that, the torus width is this, torus thickness, and MTEC is that. Okay, fine. All right. Under mechanical and or other influences, an MTEC decays with the emission of 0.77 times 10 to the power 11 electrons, accelerated to 10 keV, and 5 orders of magnitude fewer ions, mostly protons, which agrees well with Ken Shoulders. These are the only people to seriously prove from their own experiments the observations of Ken Shoulders. And they're saying that every atom has the capability to release one of these things, and then when they are blown up, they are able to produce up to 10 to the 0.77 times 10 to the power 11 electrons, and that these have energies which have been proven by the European Fusion Programme to enable nuclear reactions to occur. Okay. All right. I think that's all we need to know here. Okay, this easily explains cold fusion, including in living organisms such as bacteria and plants. And this is kind of the thing that we were talking about last week. All right, so we're back on Chuck Bennett. What I just wanted to show you there was you have a concept which is various quantizations of relic neutrinos, which is the base substrate that leads to these, what Chuck Bennett calls Q particles, and that they are responsible for the fusion in cold fusion. So you can see how the ideas are converging, and that those ideas that he shared in 2022, that is, in this case, Dubovik, Karols, and Shishkin, that they moved based on the physical observations we saw in the reactors of Binger and Huang actually doing the transmutation. But what we saw are the same scales and quantizations as observed by Ken Shoulders. And these things are produced by hydrodynamic shear in a charge separated or polar material. Okay, so it can occur in water, and it can occur in plasma, and it can occur in pseudoplasma, like protons dissolved into or deuterons or tritons dissolved into a metal. Okay, so let's go back to the man of the discussion tonight. Okay, so that was 100% support for the ideas of Chuck Bennett, which were completely mocked by the Patent Office in 1990, based on the proposal that he suggested to his employers at the time, Raytheon. Okay, so the next one in our list is called Einstein's mass dilation as ether drag. Okay, this is April 1997. Let's see where we are. And that's not that one, it's this one probably. April 1997. Okay, let's see where we are, Chuck. Bennett. Okay. Einstein's mass dilation as ether drag. Objects approaching the speed of light undergo mass increase according to Einstein's relativistic mass dilation equation. Has anyone ever wondered where the extra mass comes from? In 1905, Einstein derived the formula for mass energy equivalence as an afterthought to his publication on special relativity, on the electrodynamics of moving bodies. Special relativity is based on two principles that are only apparently irreconcilable. One, that the speed of light is measured the same in all reference frames of platforms moving relative to each other. And two, the fundamental laws of physics must be upheld. It is a common misconception that the fundamental laws are altered, but they are not. It is the measurement parameters that undergo changes in order to facilitate Einstein's two seemingly dichotomous postulates: time, forward dimension, and mass change according to the Lorentz formulas. Einstein reasoned that if the law of conservation of energy is to be preserved, then an increase in the mass is manifested as excess energy. But what about the conservation of mass? The answer to this question is in relation to the postulate of a new quantized ether follows. Einstein reasoned that the rest mass m0 must have energy m0c squared. And we later found out that this was true from the initial discovery of isotopic mass change in beta decay all the way to modern mass energy changes in fission and fusion. More recently, we have seen the discovery of low temperature fusion and transmutation with subtle mass energy release within the lattices and electrolytes of new hydrogen energy systems. In a previous article 3, a sea of particles on the order of 1,000,000 times lighter than the electron is proposed as a quantized ether, in which ether drag. What was he quoting here? Was 1,000,000 times. Right, it's more than 1,000,000. It's like 1 billion, more than a bit, nearly a bit, more than 1 billion in theirs. In which the ether drag is reintroduced as a plausible explanation for the Michelson and Morley null result. All subatomic and atomic particles are comprised of these small particles, and the particles create the ether. Particles do not pass through an ether medium, and the ether medium is not separate from particles. In other words, particles and the ether are one entity. Thus, in conclusion, the postulate emerges that actual mass transfer is responsible for the relativistic mass change. Objects at near luminal speeds literally scoop up additional mass from quantized ether. Boom! This is what I've said a long time ago. As you're going faster and faster, it's just piling up. It's just piling up on the front. Now, if you had a magnetohydrodynamic structure that has a toroidal moment that can move that matter out of the way, you are not restricted to the speed of light. The mass does not increase because it just moves the thing that would increase its mass out of the way. And what's more, it shoves it behind it where it increases the pressure behind. And this is my argument why in this type of propulsion, the faster you go, the faster you can go. Because you get more to pile behind you. You get more to pile behind you. Okay? It's exactly the argument I've been making. This is what's different between an engineer and a person with a calculator and a maths idea. You're thinking about it physically. What is going on? Of course, if you don't only have fields and you don't have particles or kind of particles, but these ether particles, then you can't conceptualize what is piling up in front because there's nothing to pile up. Okay? The law of conservation of mass is upheld. The fundamental particle introduced in reference 3 is the element for a quantized ether and acts as an agent for mass transfer in relativistic mass changes. In addition, the conservation of particular and angular momentum holds for the smallest particle of the ether. In addition, the conservation of particular angular momentum holds for the smallest particle of the ether. This particle can be taken to be the infinitesimal limit as the fundamental element of the ether approaches zero. These premises establish the seed of vortical, it's got a U there, it shouldn't have, vortical motion of the quantized ether. Okay, all right. Now, I want to see where he's going with this. So what are we in here? We are now in, oh, this is interesting. What's this? Hypothetical dynamic drive. Anyway, space energy. Is that by him as well? No, it's a different one. Demonstration of the Casimir force. Oh, very good. We'll have a look at that at some point. Right, so this is April 1997. What's the next one on our list? It's called, Einstein would have called it cold fusion. Cold fusion? Does he really say that? Anyway, May 1997. So is it that one? April, May 1997. Okay. All right. Okay, so find Bennett. Right. Oh, okay, this is wrong. It's actually, okay, it's not cold fusion, it's cold fission. Einstein would have called it cold fission. This is interesting. What are you saying here, Mr. Bennett? In a newly released article by Moon, is that David Moon? Is that David Moon? Moon model of the atom, is that the guy? Where's Moon? Moon. D Moon. Excess heat versus transmutations, to be published March 1997. Ooh. The author introduces the label of cold fission to describe the transmutation reactions associated with recent tabletop experiments manifesting a mass energy release. Yes, you are seeing cold fission. A lot of what is going on, particularly if you use heavy elements like tungsten, it's cold fission. The matter just falls apart. Just goes poof, it falls apart. When you're going from something like a tungsten atom and you're making that fall apart, that is that releases a lot of energy because the products, the fragments of that actually distort the physical vacuum less, and therefore they release energy. Experiments manifesting as mass energy release. Einstein would have welcomed this discovery as something different and better because to the average person he is credited with a naive transition from E equals mc squared to the atom bomb. And he certainly was a compassionate pacifist who would rather see his postulate of mass energy harnessed in a small tabletop environment that is useful, rather than an insidious device that can flash a city to oblivion in a split second. You know, maybe he saw some things in Raytheon. Maybe he saw some things in your Raytheon and, you know, that wasn't for him. Einstein, among others, reasoned that rest mass m0 must have energy m0c squared. This was later proven to be true from the initial discovery of isotopic mass change in beta decay all the way to modern mass energy changes in fission and fusion. More recently, we have seen the discovery of how low temperature fusion and transmutation releases subtle mass energy within the lattices and electrolytes of new hydrogen energy systems. Some of these transmutation reactions have the characteristics of traditional fission. I agree, i.e. splitting of atoms to lower atomic numbers. I agree. Having an overall loss in mass and the subsequent release of excess mass energy to account for the loss in mass. Yes. The sequential triad of energetic triggers consisting of conventional activation such as chemical or electromagnetic that triggers a fission reaction, that in turn triggers a fusion reaction, is the exact formula for the hydrogen bomb. Yes, fission leads to fusion. But to have this reduced to micro scale that can be controlled in the laboratory to produce useful energy is a major step in the goal to safely harness the use of mass energy. And the resulting fusions do not necessarily have to be DD type. No, they don't. They could be, for instance, what I believe was a major component of the Castle Bravo bomb because of what was found off the coast of Indonesia, or rather Papua New Guinea, by Avi Loeb. That is iron-rich crenellated spheres with some of the fuel from what would appear from a nuclear bomb, uranium, natural uranium that was used in Castle Bravo. The iron-rich crenellated spheres could have come from fusion of the aluminium, which was nearly 50% of the bomb's mass, even though it had a lot of uranium in it, natural uranium. Okay. And the resulting fusions do not necessarily have to be the DD type fusion of pairs of identical isotopes. We have seen the release of energy in fusions of protons colliding into a larger nuclei that produce benign isotopes that also result in the release of excess energy to account for an overall loss of mass of the sum of constituents. So this is the Neal-Gleason process. We should probably look at Neal-Gleason. Thus, in summary, all types of known and newly discovered mass energy reactions are emerging from low-temperature tabletop experiments, including a new type of fusion consisting of collisions with protons or deuterium ions into larger atoms in lattices and/or electrolytes. Then we have a whole new system that is not in any textbook anywhere. Yes, not in any textbook. You can't have a PhD in this. You can't have an opinion that matters in this because it doesn't exist anywhere. This was new. This is new. This is why the application of known traditional fusion systems fails to explain the results of tabletop mass energy experiments in terms of Coulomb barrier postulate. Why? Because it's a coherent energy transformation process. New theories, new ethers, and new particles have established a new science that goes back to where Einstein left off, following the publication of groundbreaking and historical articles in 1905. In the interests of peace and infinite energy, Einstein would have wanted it this way. I could not agree more. Thank you very much, Mr. Bennett. Okay, where does he take this next? The next thing, we've only got two more, no, maybe three more. Three more. What's the next one? Light is the ghost of mass. Interesting. Light is the ghost of mass. Where is that? That is in July 1997. This is that. July 19... here we go. July 1997. Okay. Light is, I like the title in this one. Let's see what it has to say. Light is the ghost of mass. This decade has seen an upsurge in the interest to resurrect a workable ether in order to provide a practical medium for the analysis of newly discovered phenomena such as over-unity hydrogen energy production. The manipulation of gravitation... Oh, hello! He's putting these two together. The manipulation of gravitation and over-unity electric motors. An ether concept based on a permeable medium whereby matter and light waves were separate from each other was squashed as superfluous at the turn of the century. Therefore, the new ether must provide an answer to the obstacles encountered, such as manifested by the water-filled telescopes, stellar aberration, and the Michelson-Morley null result. One approach to this overall goal is to invoke the property of quantization or discrete particles to the fundamental structure of the ether. Yes. In a recent interview with Arthur C. Clarke, the power available from empty space in terms of zero-point energy is described by the late Nobel laureate Julian Schwinger as the tapping of the quantum fluctuations. The quantization of the ether may be explained by the view that the ether consists of a sea of particles that are on the order of 1,000,000 times lighter than the electron. The mass range of the particles is in the range for the spectrum of all light photons. I agree. Therefore, the ether may simply consist of a medium of condensed photons. I like it. Then light can be viewed as evaporated mass and mass as condensed light. Yes, I've thought this ever since I learned of a positron annihilating an electron. I like this. I like this. Thank you, Chuck. I can see your thinking. Stephen Rados characterized this approach in terms of an ideal gas. As far as knowing what is in between the particles, it doesn't matter. And that statement is to be taken literally because there may not be any definable matter between the particles. Well, in my view, there is no gap, and the fractal toroidal electrodynamics allows for no gap in the entire universe. Just uncondensed primordial gradient fields or vacuum. Okay. A theory for gravitation has been presented based on the approach that gravity is the ether wind. Yes, Chuck, I agree. Gravity is related to mass, and mass is related to light energy via the equation E equals mc squared. Gravity can be modelled as a mass gradient. I'm seeing some overtones of some people we've been talking about with angle grinders and lasers recently. Gravities can be modelled as a mass gradient, and is shown to be inversely proportional to the emanation of light energy as light gradient by the proportionality constant c squared. In other words, light is basically a hole in the quantized ether that travels as a perturbation opposite the knocking action of the particles that comprise the medium. So this is really thinking back to the luminiferous ether with this gel-like medium, and that the vibration of that, he's calling it knocking here, allows for the propagation of the photons. And he's additionally arguing something that I've argued many times, that different clusters of relic neutrinos allow for different frequencies of light to propagate. This is why light can be thought of as the ghost of mass. I do like that term. This phenomena was emphasized in two well-known actions. When a Boom! When a positron and an electron meet, the mass does not necessarily get annihilated. Okay, it simply turns into an equivalent. Yeah, okay, so the mass. Okay, so it's turned into energy. It simply gets turned into the equivalent of the amount of light energy in the form of two powerful photons traveling in opposite directions with opposite spins. Right, yeah, of course. In another example, there's another one here. When an electron hops from a higher orbit to a lower orbit, a quantum of light energy as a photon is released, as exemplified by the Bohr hydrogen atom model, in a spectrum of discrete quantum energies. The mass loss of the electron is negligible, but the mass and energy of the photon is described by the relationship E equals mp c squared equals hf, where and mpc that equals h, where mp is the equivalent mass of the photon, h is the Planck's constant, f is the frequency, and this is the wavelength. And this is related to f by c equals that f. Photon emission is a good example of where mass, the electron, goes in, and light, the photon, goes out. See Anastovsky and Bennett's book, Quantum... Oh, he's written a book. See, has he written a book? Quantum Mass Theory Compatible with Quantum Field Theory. Okay, see if anyone can find that book. Anastovsky and Bennett's book. All right. A quantized ether allows general relativity to be reduced to the mechanics of real and workable medium rather than... This is what an engineer does. He tries to make it into something that can be thought about and actually engineered. Reduced to a mechanics of real and workable medium rather than an abstract notion that space is curved, described by a stream of ambiguous mathematics. Real models of physics have enabled the engineering of flight, and hopefully, this is what you get from someone that worked as an aerospace engineer. Engineering of flight, and hopefully can be extended to the speed of light realm to enable luminal or superluminal spaceflight. Yes, Chuck, I think it will. The three so-called proofs of general relativity may be explained by quantized ether. Gravitation may be the process where the particles that comprise the particle C are accelerated inwards to the center of a mass. Yes, Chuck. Yes. I agree. Therefore, light would be slowed going against gravity and accelerated towards gravity. This, yes, it's basically, I call it the gravitational well. This concept has been shown to be true in experiments where the frequency of photons is shifted to red or blue, depending on the direction of the Earth's gravitational field, or depending on which side of a ball lightning you're looking at. Light from distant stars gets bent towards the sun. Yeah, it's very much talking like our Russian friend with his angle grinder and laser. As viewed from the Earth by a very subtle amount, gravity as the ether wind explains this phenomena. I agree. And finally, if gravitation is limited by the tangential speed of underlying particles of the ether, analogous to sound in gas molecules, then very subtle effect would be observed in rare occasions, such as the delay in the orb of the perihelion of planet Mercury as a deviation from the calculations based on Newtonian gravitation. Okay, I like it. I like it. He's saying that this is what we've learnt about recently. It's been proved with that laser and spinning angle grinder experiment. And yeah, it's this ether wind, this ether flux. Very, very nice. Very nice. I would just say that it's condensing that matter. That's where we're going. Okay, so we got one more paper here. Let's have a look what he says here. So, yeah, I couldn't find this. Oh, maybe two thoughts on the tempest. Maybe I can find it. New Energy News, May 1999. Is that this one? Oh, this is May 1999. So there might be two papers in this. So two thoughts on the tempest. Okay, so let's try tempest here. Okay. Okay. So, this is cool. Okay. Two thoughts on the tempest. From the New York Times website, Science Forum, Science in the News, April 8th, 1999. Two responses to a tempest in a test tube by William J. Okay. To everyone who's discussing the femtosecond. Okay. Did someone... Okay, someone actually replied this. Okay, right. Your article of March the 23rd, A Tempest in the Test Tube, 10 years later by William J. Broad, seems to have been a catalyst to trigger an onslaught of tabletop fusion activity. The most recently reported today in Nature magazine, April the 8th, nuclear fusion from explosions of femtosecond laser-heated deuterium clusters, nature.com. Also recently reported in US News and World Report, April 5th, 1999, fusion in miniature. This is no surprise to Arthur C. Clarke and then blah, blah, blah. Okay. The literature, if a plasma, I don't see, okay, it says, okay, Chuck Bennett, it does say Chuck Bennett down here. The iron atoms act much as molecular-sized damping rods. Okay, I don't know, I think he's just responding to something else. Okay, let's actually look for his name and find the article that's the main article in here. Okay, there's another one here called Thomson scattering. What's that? Light may slow down. Okay. Okay, I don't see this, but Chuck Bennett has said something here. I don't think. No, that's not really his words. I think. Okay, right, I don't quite know what's going on there. All right, here we go. This is the last article, I think, by Chuck Bennett, and it's called. Where is it? The Dynamics of Neutrinos. The Dynamics of Neutrinos. Okay, what are you going to tell us, Chuck? President, Space Ventures, Sacramento. Wow. He's moved up from, this is 1999. So in 1989, they mocked him, but now he's president of Space Ventures, Sacramento. Back in 1995, he was submitting a patent with Warren Cooley that got classified. But here, at the end of the century, he's now president of Space Ventures. He's not a lowly engineer anymore. Okay, mock you now. This monograph is a continuation in a series of articles 1 to 4 dedicated to the creation of a unified theory that encompasses the known forces of nature. A postulate has been established that neutrinos possessing mass, okay, we know they possess mass because we know that 6.93 times 10 to the power 20 of them amount to 1.0235 times 10 to the power minus 40 kilograms, according to Dubovik, Karolz, and Shishkin. That neutrinos possessing mass pervade the universe, thus creating a luminiferous medium. Yes, Mr. President of Space Ventures. A foundation for the dynamics of the neutrino medium is presented herein. The mass-energy equation can be interpreted as a statement that mass is comprised of a condensed neutrino group. Boom! Yes, yes, mass is comprised of a condensed neutrino group. Absolutely. Therefore, energy propagation as evaporated mass can be rewritten in terms of a differential rate. The equation E equals mc squared is differentiated with respect to radial distance r. The rate of electromagnetic energy propagation outwards is inversely proportional to the rate of mass gradient inwards. The proportionality constant is the speed of light squared. Thus, the gravitation equation is expressed in the following equation. The change in E over the change in radius equals the change in mass over the change in radius to the power of c squared. The above expression summarizes how gravitation is caused by electromagnetic gradients radiating. This does sound a lot like what we've been talking about in recent months. From a large body, gravity and light energy are one in the same by an inverse relation and a proportionality constant c squared. As light energy radiates outward, a bias in the mass-energy field is established across all spectrums of light energy. The effect is amplified by the power of mass energy. The gravitation effect is subtle, but very little is needed to move mass when the amplification factor is c squared. Note that the gradient delta E over delta R has the units of force. This really, right here, this language to me is telling me that when in 2004, when Ken Shoulders is describing that ounces of apparatus can lift tons into orbit, this is really, combining with what we've learned from Shishkin, really is saying that that is a thing. That really is a thing. When you've got all of those spin nuclei, spin moments aligned. And I refer again back to the work on plasmoid propulsion of Richard Estridge and Amy Estridge. Has the units of force due to the definition of energy as force times distance. Also note that the change in mass over the change in radius is a mass gradient, and this describes the gravitational field. Then gravity may be described as an ether wind of there we go, an ether wind of neutrinos. Yep, I think they are. This establishes gravitation as an ongoing and continuous... Whoa! This establishes gravitation... You know what? You've never had an original idea. You're just realizing. Look at this. Look at this. This is just beautiful. This establishes gravitation. Okay, this is a bit weird right now because you know what I say, like I always feel like I'm cheating. Right now, I think the person that I've been remote viewing for a number of years probably has been Chuck Bennett. I think it's probably been Chuck Bennett because look at this phrase. This establishes, it's not what anything but establishes gravitation as an ongoing and continuous condensation of the neutrino medium. A continuous and ongoing condensation. That's why I say the planet grows bigger. Michelson and Morley would have demonstrated a wavelength shift if one of the arms of the interferometer had been pointed straight up. Boom! Just like that guy who showed that it does do a interferometry wavelength shift because he had it pointing up. In fact, he had both, one up and one down. Wonderful. Oh, Mr. Bennett, no wonder you're president of Space Ventures. Mocking no more. Your patent is classified, and now you're president of Space Ventures, and you know that this is the gravitational well I talk about, the continuous condensation of neutrino medium with these, just one MTech or energy soliton, according to Shishkin, Karols, and Dubovik, is, I'll pull it up here. Where are we? Here. The mass of the entire energy soliton is 1.0235 times 10 to the power minus 40 kilograms. That is not very heavy. And that entire thing contains 6.93 times 10 to the power 20. So you have to divide that weight by 6.93 times 10 to the power 20. Okay? You get a lot of these things into one energy soliton, and every single atom has an energy soliton. You have to cause a lot of these things, right? Okay, Michelson and Morley would have blah, 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 blah. And this has indeed been proven in terms of the so-called red or blue shift of photons traveling towards or away from the Earth's center along a gravitational vector. Einstein's equivalence principle is another statement that gravity is the neutrino ether wind. Freefall is more inertial than fixed at the Earth's surface because in freefall, objects appear to be weightless. An accelerometer that has not been reset to zero at the fixed state, a pure accelerometer, will read 0 in freefall and will read 1g when fixed at the Earth's surface. This means that objects fixed at the Earth's surface of the surface of the Earth are equivalent to having an acceleration of 1g, and when in freefall there are no compressive forces. It's a push model of gravity. He said compressive. It's a push model of gravity. This is typically explained by the so-called body force of gravity that acts on each and every point with equal force, so that in freefall there is no registration of compressive force. In freefall, there is no force because freefall is the process of the neutrino ether accelerating inward at 1g. Yes, Mr. Bennett. In other words, the neutrino ether is inertial space. Yes, Mr. Bennett. Yes. When you fix, you don't have inertia, and when you are able to move all of these things out of the way, you have no inertia because they don't have to go through you. They don't bunch up on you, so you don't have relativistic mass increases. Not a problem. I've been saying this for years. This is a very good argument written out here in 1999 by President of Space Ventures. In other words, the neutrino ether is inertial space, and to be fixed against an acceleration of the neutrino ether is not to be fixed against the acceleration of inertial space. Spin arrests the action of gravity. Yes! 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 Spin arrests the action of gravity and causes mass to stabilize in an orbit or an action that resembles gravitational repulsion. Yes. Since heat is a form of spinning mass, the negation of gravity may be possible with a contained thermal gradient that has a very large magnitude of gradient and is opposite the gravitational field. Yep. Yep. That's what these things make. They make a very, 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 very large gradient. It's kind of non-thermal, but the energy density in the cores is extremely high. But it is stable because it's a coherent energy structure. The above approach introduces the view of a Bernoulli effect on all types of fundamental particles. When a particle flows past another particle in a close tangential flyby, a void is created. Then the first particle begins to fill the void. The principle, come on, tell me the principle, of void filling is a fundamental law of nature. This is why the vortex... Oh! I can hear Ashton Forbes saying, Chuck Bennett is my spirit animal now. This is why the vortex feeds on itself to get stronger and stronger with increasing tangential velocity towards the center until a threshold is reached and a matter or neutrino ether goes out through the top and or bottom of the vortex center I. Boom! Boom! Yes! Yes! Yes, Chuck. I love this. Look at this sentence. This is literal gold. This is why the vortex feeds on itself to get stronger and stronger with increasing tangential velocity towards the center, the phase singularity, until a threshold is reached and matter or neutrino ether goes out through the top and or bottom of the vortex center I. The divine creator, from alpha repeatedly to omega, understands, comprehends, and works with whirlwinds. Chuck, so near, so near, so near. 1999. A quarter of a century ago, Chuck. Thank you. But it's fractal. That is just amazing. But this is the Bernoulli void-filling principle in action. The inward acceleration of inertial space is a secondary outcome of the flyby tangential effect that manifests as gravity. This provides a view that does not have to treat the neutrino ether as having finite compressibility. The neutrino ether conforms to fit the manifestation of the natural realm in a way that explains the effects observed. Further reasoning can be applied to explain the other three forces of nature. The various forces are simply due to the Bernoulli flyby void-filling effect at different proximities with different constants of magnitude. Gravitation is due to the tangential action of the electromagnetic gradients that permeate all bodies and pull items inwards, Okay, if he's saying all of the forces are based on this, and we know gravity is the weakness, and you just need to build it up, he's basically making my argument for me. He's saying, if you take this vortex and build its strength, and build its strength, ultimately, you will combine the forces. You will unify the forces. That is what I suspect he's going to go and say something like that now. The strong force is a similar action at a hyper-magnified level. The electron is a spherical vortex that is tumbling through space. Attraction cannot be distinguished from repulsion because the tumbling, careening action of the flyby will look like a repulsion when two electrons attract each other and result in a powered flyby. Two electrons coming together, spin up, spin down, forming a Bose-Einstein condensate in a ring singularity, constantly flying by each other, building because they're bosons, making a magnetic core, driving both superconductivity and phase coherence fractally. And that will unify the forces. Chuck Bennett's treatment here in words is spectacular. Attraction cannot be distinguished from repulsion because the tumbling, careening action of the flyby will look like a repulsion when two electrons attract each other and result in a powered flyby. A positron and electron attract because a positron is a reverse flow spherical vortex, so there is always superposition of attraction for all points in the merger of the two flow fields. The proton attracts an electron because the proton is more stationary and stable and can anchor the Bernoulli void-filling effect to cause the electron to have a stable orbit. The other forces of nature are merely the same effect on a different scaling basis. This gives a universal theory born from the neutrino ether. Classical mechanics, with waves, forces, collisions, etc., are outcomes of the basic action. Waves result when streams of particles group together and travel according to the motion template of a helical spiral. Oh dear, come on! This is like a naughty text for me. Of a helical spiral pattern that links the action of the particle to a sinusoidal wave as seen from the side view. Thus, the neutrino ether possesses a high degree of orthogonality. Oh. The wheels within the wheels within the wheels are orthogonally self-organizing. They are orthogonally self-organizing. Mr. Bennett, no one is mocking you now. No one is laughing at you. No one is attacking you. Mr. Bennett, you are winning. In conclusion, the neutrino ether will conform to make all known phenomena exist in a way that provides the laws of nature. Many new variations of a resurrected ether have recently been posed. The concepts presented herein are just another addition to the ongoing effort to re-establish a workable ether with the neutrino of finite mass as the basic building block of the ether. Yes, Chuck. Yes. The leading scientists in Russia, the leading researcher who discovered the toroidal moment. They believe it's made of ubiquitous relic neutrinos and that they are quantized up and lead to all of the observed effects. Knowing this, you know for certain that when we crack cold fusion, just as Stoyansag said, he would give me anti-gravity because they are inextricably linked. One little thing gives you all of the magic. And with that, I will ask for your questions. Wow, that was incredible. Incredible reading that. Incredible. Yeah, Ken Pratt, I need a cold vortex shower. I definitely need it. Definitely. Oh my God. This is like a wet dream. I have to go back to my my cover slide here. Look at all these learned people with their lab coats. And the poor engineer inventor mocked and derided. His Project Dream, Prototype 1. Why won't you support me now? Why are you doing what I said you should do now? Why are you classifying my patents? Why do I move from a contract engineer to being president of Space Ventures? Why do I do, you know what, the inventor of the Stinger missile, the guy that likes to talk to John Hutchison, yeah, that guy, Boyd Bushman, before he died said, Lockheed Martin are working on an energy source that is way, way beyond fusion. And he mentions it in the same sentences as John Hutchison, anti-gravity, and the neutrino verse. You can go and watch my discussion on that in a video I made a long time ago called Hacking the Neutrino Verse. This is it, folks. This is definitely it. I can't think of more valuable sources of information than Boyd Bushman and Chuck Bennett and Vladimirovich Dubovik and Alexander Shishkin. This is it. And it is whirlwinds that are the key to creation and decreation of matter. We have physically observed this process occurring, tearing matter apart, cold fission. We have seen it fuse nuclei together, cold fusion. And we have seen it transmuting matter. And it does it by the flyby of coherent electrons around the phase singularity. That phase singularity is at the core and subcores of a fractal toroidal magnetohydrodynamic structure, which produces a fractal toroidal moment. And in those cores, you get coherent energy transformations. And that itself will produce a spin wave of Rayleigh neutrinos in a focused beam. As it pulls, it's like a laser, like a spike, like a aero spike coming out of the structure of this thing. We've physically seen matter of similar type ignore magnetic fields, ignore electric fields, and spin round the forward-looking beam of these structures, which can interconnect if they're arranged. You know, you have 3 of them around an object you want to make a cluster of the next fractal level up. Okay, or 2, minimally, but 3 is good. 4, better. 6, really good. 5, not so bad. And it's pulling most of the ether quantized structures out of the way and ramming it up its arse. This is able to work with literally the wheelwork of nature. And it's able to get energy at any point in the universe. Magic. Maybe this is a silly question, but what is a proper description of a neutrino? This is a question I'm going to propose to Shishkin. I have a good relationship with him. I think I've asked it before. I didn't really get a straight answer. But it's an oscillating electric field and a poloidal oscillating magnetic field. And then you're going to say, what's in? Well, there's always going to be a what's in. But that's what I have for you. It's the smallest thing we know that exists. And there's different energies of them, but there are clusters of those. And fundamental relic LC dipoles, inductor capacitor dipoles. So they are the first thing that presents a non-radiating boundary. So in a field sense, that's when you kind of basically get to a field. But there is a thing up to that, you know, from that point upwards. So that's the best answer I have for you right now. But the working methodology, which I've been describing for literally half a decade, is compliant and predictive of physical objects we have seen, those physical objects that we have seen in experiments, multiple experiments, in different types of experiments. And I'm going to show you more as we go forward. This isn't all I've got to share. It just takes time. All right. It is what is going on. And all of the above is possible. If you go and look at my presentation that I gave at the second presentation from Cosmic Summit, I've described what you need to do. You know, I kind of like other people to do it, but I guess ultimately, if no one can be bothered, then I'll give it a go. And probably won't be that expensive, but it might take a lot of time. But it's weird reading the published articles of Chuck Bennett. Just totally freaky, in my view. And it was weird enough to see that his patent with Warren Cooley, who I think was the principal author, but I think what happened was Chuck Bennett made this presentation and he was approached by Warren Cooley and they joined together because Warren Cooley could do X, Y, and Z and Chuck Bennett had these kind of engineering skills and they put that patent together. And I think it was just too close to the bone. If at all, the US Department of Energy or Department of Defense has a technology that's in this family, then that would have been why they stopped it. And did they give him a nice side gig of being the president of Space Ventures? Ventures, I mean, it's like, I'm already in space and now I can do ventures. It's like, what even is that? What does he mean by that? There's a lot of work to be done, but reading his post, he seems to have this load of articles around the time that his patent was being considered, which is referring to his thinking that went all the way back to 1989. And then suddenly there's this pretty big gap, and then there is this paper on neutrinos. Now, he's not saying relic neutrinos, but, you know, there was less consideration for that back then. And I can't fault him from what he's saying. It completely, you know, this is a guy where I had to work out how to make a device that will do this. I see it's a magnetohydrodynamic structure, fractal magnetohydrodynamic, which he never really goes into. I don't think he knew that. But anyway, the thing that you see from the outside is magnetohydrodynamic. So, you know, if it works, you don't need to go any further. And then you get this thing where he's just spelling it out. He's spelling it out, and it's exactly how I understand it. Gravity is a condensation, an ongoing condensation of relic neutrinos or neutrinos. It is what causes the push model of gravity as a result. When you understand it, inertia is not a problem. And you do not have relativistic mass effects because it is what causes those relativistic mass effects. Is just a bunching up in front. And the structure that I'm proposing for the sphere around an object that would want to travel faster is this structure that moves the ether out of the way and shoves it up its arse. So Corky Goss said, what is the general cost of the device you have in mind? So my brother spent 7 years developing his resonance engine, and then it took a further 6 years to get a worldwide patent, and that patent cost about 900,000 English pounds to do. And then he was one of 5 people that patent and those concepts which was representing innovation and invention in the UK as part of the US Department of Energy and Defense, going to the US Department of Energy and Defense in the US. Relatively simple by comparison. I don't know. I'm not looking to patent anything, just to make it happen. And you can, I've said this phrase before, my dad used to like to use it, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And that's basically, you can literally show them the thing that they need to do to not die or not have a problem, and they just won't do it. You can't force them to do it. So ultimately, that might have to happen. I've got to get some things out of the way, but we'll see. But what I'm saying is this is how it's done, in my view. I don't see any reason why it's not. The physical experiment shows it. I think everything you need to know about coherent energy transformations is in the video called Flux Capacitor. You can go and see it on the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. I can show you many, many, many other examples that show the process in action. But what Chuck Bennett is described right here comports with Boyd Bushman. It comport and his claims of what Lockheed Martin were doing. It comports with the well, whatever, just with everything, but principally with what Ken Shoulders said in 2004. Yeah, my brother was showed the lights in the sky, and I remember even when I was in my early teens, he was obsessed with anti-gravity devices. He actually built, long before drones were a thing, some big drones. And as I've said to you before, I literally wrote the documents that led to the modern warfare. And I hate the fact that I did that. I said a long time ago, in the early 2000s, when I was helping my brother get the financing to do his nano air vehicle propulsion system, I said that basically drones are going to change all of modern warfare, and I literally wrote the scenarios. I hate the fact that I did that. And I know that it went to militaries all around the world. And I'm sorry if the universe means that I'm partially responsible for anyone passing on. But if you are saying the sky's falling in and we need energy, or we need to be able to harvest your data faster and tell you what you already said faster, and you need lots of energy to do that, well, either you need energy or you don't. And I believe that this is energy. It's a proper way to manipulate matter through coherent energy transformations using both neutrinos and antineutrinos and their various flavors, manipulating those to make lighter and heavier elements that distort the physical vacuum less, yielding energy release, and also to synthesizing elements that we need technologically. Yeah. Did I miss anything of his works? No, I don't think so. Thank you for your donation, my channel. Very, very appreciated. Yeah, it probably is, but like, I know it's kind of inevitable, but when you sat across from generals in a boat in the middle of the Thames, how do we knock drones out of the sky? Well, they've got lots of technologies to deal with that. For me, it's the energy and propulsion that we're working on now. If people want to contact me, do it through remoteview.icu. I did a multifaceted engineering degree, which was basically all of the courses at Brunel University. It was called Special Engineering Program. We did all of the courses. I had only 2 hours a week without a course. So I did manufacturing engineering, electrical engineering, electronics, physics, materials science, psychology, accounting, whatever. Every course. Did all of the courses. And then I wanted to do a bit more practical stuff. So on the second year, I switched to Brunel Manufacturing Engineering. So I learned engineering, and when I saw how this guy was treated when he first came up with his concepts within 24 hours of Pons and Fleischmann's announcement, I have immense respect. I don't know, at what stage in his life he was, other than working in aerospace and energy or utility companies, but he definitely had the right kind of line of thinking about these things. And I can imagine what's going on in his head, and he's trying to find physical things that would be able to be manipulated in a kind of electrodynamic but physical way via electrodynamics, and I think he's right on the money. So I will share the text of all of these documents in the blog, so that you can read through them again. And I'm not surprised that he was president of Space Ventures. An aerospace engineer, denied funding for research, mocked because of his lack of the right credentials, mocked and denied. And then when he has another patent with a third party, it gets classified. Were they taking him seriously at that point? Well, they might have been taking the patent seriously, but were they taking him seriously? Was he taken seriously and he got given a golden parachute or something and set up Space Ventures, and that was supported, and he just had to mind his time? But thank you for releasing that 1999 document, because I think you were very close to the truth. This was First They Mock You. My name is Bob Grenier. Buenas noches. Dobranoc. Good night.